This is not just about thriving in the workplace or a better education system. This is about the survival of the human race. Empathy has two great enemies. One is low time, and the other is high stress. If we are to survive and, yes, thrive as a human race, it will be empathy that is the point of difference.
This is Elemental Conversations, where leadership isn't just talked about, it's tested. I'm Tyler, your host, helping you lead with your values, push through adversity, roll with change, and make bold decisions. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and if you're ready to challenge the status quo, then get ready to let the alchemy of education ignite your passion for learning.
Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator, and now your host, Tyler Como.
Who's been your biggest influence?
Ooh, my dad. Yeah, Tyler, probably my dad.
Why do you say that?
Well, my dad was an ad man, so he worked in advertising. If you ever watched Mad Men on Netflix, that was his life in real life. And I grew up watching him run these businesses with this huge clarity that I wanted to be like him, actually. He passed away about 6 months ago. But every time I stand on stage or I write a new prologue for the next book, I think of him and what he would have said and what he would have done. He was a very wise man. He was a very generous man. He had high expectations, but he always did it with kindness. So, yes, I think I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be a bit more like him.
Knowing all of the lessons he could have taught you, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give your younger self now?
Oh, gosh, Tyler, that is a big question. And interestingly, people ask me similar things quite often now. I think I would talk about patience. I've been learning that this week. But I think I would tell my younger self that all good things come to those who wait, and that patience is probably the greatest skill set of our time. Social media makes us feel like everything is happening overnight. You know, that Tyler's show became this phenomenal on day one, which maybe it was, but it probably wasn't this good then, right?
Heck no.
There you go, right? That patience and just taking your time and knowing that the right things will come for you, and you know, when they're meant for you, they will come into life. So I think if I could go back, I would tell younger Mimi to just slow down a bit, to be patient, and to know that this is a 10-year game, not a 10-minute one.
I love the message. And moving forward through the show today, what's the most important thing that our audience needs to know about you to understand the rest of your story?
Well, Tyler, I don't think they need to understand anything about me, but I think they need to understand everything about empathy, which is what my passion and purpose work is, to create more of it in the world. So if I had to really simplify that down, I would love for this show to enable your listeners, and probably educators, teachers, people that are passionate about the future, to understand how important this superpower is, this skill set is, in reconnecting our world and of course our schools, our children, our teachers of the future, but also our societies at large.
Alchemists, welcome to a new episode. Today's guest is a trailblazing advocate for empathy and leadership, a best-selling author, global coach, and host of influential shows like the Empathy for Breakfast show and Mimi Nicklin. With 18 plus years leading creative and empathetic initiatives across continents, Mimi is the founder and CEO of Empathy Everywhere and the author of Softening the Edge. She's trained over 20,000 leaders in Fortune 500s, appeared on stages alongside thought leaders, including Bill Gates, and is on a mission to reconnect 1 million people through empathy. I'm honored to welcome Mimi to our show. And Mimi, thank you so much for taking the time out of your morning to join me this evening.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. When you reached out and told me about your vision for your show, Tyler, it was very easy to say yes.
We recorded a show, and I was telling you before I pressed record, I talked with somebody from Australia this morning whose episode would come out 1 week before this one does. And every time we try to get somebody from the future, we always get winning lottery numbers, of course. And he gave us his unique take on them.
Mm.
So I'm curious if you've got a lucky number for anybody
A
today.
lucky number. 18.
18, there you go. Pick 18 with whatever it is you're doing, and I hope it brings you fortune and good luck. And that being said, in our brief little chat here, we start to talk about some things that are core to you, some values. And Mimi, that's going to bring us to our first segment, our Earth segment, where we unpack these values in grounded moments. Hey, alchemists, before we jump into our first segment, I wanted to let you in on a little secret. Every Monday, I'm emailing everybody on my list 3 to 1 pieces of advice to kick off their leadership week. They're actionable, they're quick, it takes 60 seconds to read, and if you want to sign up, check the link in the description.
3, 2, 1.
Rooted in wisdom, driven by purpose, Grounded Moments is all about our values, and there's no way to see what we truly stand for than to play a game. Okay, so this game is called Principle or Preference. I'm going to give you a sentence, a general statement, and you just have to let the audience know if this is a core principle,
Okay.
so something that is true to you, should be true to a lot of people, or if it's a preference. It's okay to let it go sometimes. Ready to give it a try?
I'm ready.
All right, so rapid fire, we don't get time to do any explanations, which is the hardest part. Principle or preference, hiring for attitude should be over hiring for credentials.
Principle.
Reading emotions in a boardroom is necessary when trying to unpack a difficult conversation.
Principle.
Saying, I hear you, before offering advice is the first thing you need to do.
Principle.
Turning off your phone in every meeting is crucial to move forward.
Preference.
Never using email for emotional conversations is number one priority.
Preference.
Always prioritizing team wellness over team deadlines.
Principle.
Starting every one-on-one with a personal check-in by saying, are you okay?
Preference.
Leading with tears, not toughness, is more important.
Preference.
Ending meetings with gratitude is the most important part of the meeting.
Preference.
Speaking last so others feel heard first is the number one thing a leader should do.
Principle.
There we go. That was a rapid fire game. Thank you for playing Principle or Preference. I need to know from that, what are the top 3 things, Mimi, that you look for in team members or emerging leaders?
Oh, gosh, top 3. I think you touched on some of them there, Tyler. I think, my work really specializes in how we create more connection and understanding in the workplace. So the first thing I'm going to be looking for is that ability to listen to others, to really be able to put other people's, as you said, their opinions and perspectives before your own. And that doesn't mean instead of, I often teach people that empathy is not about agreement or judgment, simply about the act of understanding. So I think today, and in the AI world that we live in, the ability to listen to others, the ability to actually create the space for people to speak and to share is probably one of the key skill sets of our time. I think underneath that, I would say the second part is around curiosity. Leading with curiosity. You touched on it a little bit there, having meetings where you're open to question asking and then to really understanding the answers. This is really about the why and not just the data, as it were. So my second one would be around curiosity. And my third one would probably be around something that we call psychological safety, which is definitely a trending term now around the world, which is creating spaces where people can really be themselves, where they can thrive, where they don't have, a fear to speak up, where they're open to sharing opinions and ideas and innovation. So those are all very much connected. I would call that a listening-led leader, someone who has the ability to lead their team with listening first, with curiosity, and in creating that safety for everybody to turn up as their full selves, really.
A literal thought leader, right? As we like to call some of those leaders, I'm curious, Mimi, is there a difference between when we talk about curiosity and when we label somebody as being nosy?
Oh, yes, I think there definitely is. I think curiosity is that ability to really show interest beyond the immediate piece of information. So sentences like, tell me more about that, or can you help me understand why you got to that conclusion, right? It is really fundamentally about understanding. It is about reconnection. It is about closing the gaps, building trust and belonging, and that sense of value. When somebody uses curiosity, you feel they value me, which is a critical part of being human, actually. Whereas being nosy, and it's funny, I haven't heard that phrase for so many years, but I think being nosy is when you are actively trying to search out information that perhaps wasn't for you anyway, right? So curiosity is that ability to understand more about what you're hearing, whereas perhaps nosiness is to interfere with information that people weren't planning on giving you anyway. So I think the intention behind them is different. Curiosity has a very positive, abundant sort of approach, whereas maybe nosiness is not with such positive intentions behind it. I'll have to check the diary dictionary.
Yeah, so either one, maybe, who knows? But what I'm hearing from you is that curiosity is that idea to go deeper into something, where on the other
Yes.
side, that nosiness, it's almost like a sense of entitlement that you think you have to be privy to information that you don't necessarily need to know.
Mm.
But speaking of that curiosity and, telling me more, before you came onto the show, I asked you to share a quote with me. And the one that you shared was, the more the world talks about empathy, the
Mm.
more empathy the world will have. And so I would love for you to tell me more about this, about where you got this quote from and why you chose to bring it on the show today.
Thank you. And Tyler, I started saying that in and around 2019 when my journey into empathy advocacy really began. I honestly don't remember the first time where it came from. Probably it was in a podcast, but it was many years ago. It came from the soul. I always believed it, that this journey to creating more empathy in the world was based on content, was based on, you mentioned earlier, I had a breakfast show, podcast, video content, speaking on stages, writing my books. I've just finished my third. So creating content.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And that quote comes from that belief, right? The more we can create conversation about this, and that's why I love doing this. So Tyler, thank you for inviting me to do that today. That the more we talk about this, the more we will create, because empathy is really misunderstood. It is also very underrepresented, in the workplace, in the world, in the school system, with our children, in our parenting. So it's a quote that came to me, as I said, many years ago, very naturally. Then I began to say it more often, and now it's almost become my kind of catchphrase because it so simply encapsulates why I do what I do. I get up every day to create more empathy because the more the world talks about it, the more we'll have. And there's never been a time when we need empathy more than now.
So, of what we value, I've never thought of empathy as a core value. I've maybe thought of it as a route to relationships or a route to connection.
Mm.
Would you draw similar lines to that, or would you stand by empathy as a standalone value? Is it a part of something bigger?
I think you can value empathy as a person, as a teacher, as a leader, as a podcaster. But I think more than that, this is a skill set. It's not, for me, this is not a value. As I said, you can value it, but you would value it as a skill set. Empathy is built into your prefrontal cortex of your brain. You were born with this. All of us were, right? The choice to use it is up to you. But the ability to be able to use it is built into the prefrontal cortex. So this is a pro-evolutionary skill set. This is not just about thriving in the workplace or a better education system. This is about the survival of the human race. And I think that's why there is so much work to be done to make sure that people know that. People think that, like you said, perhaps it's a value, perhaps it's a soft skill, perhaps it means kindness or sympathy or compassion. But the answer, of course, is no to all of those things. This is a hard skill, hard to find, hard to master, very hard to maintain. And when we get it right, we see many hard impacts, including, Tyler, what you just spoke about, which is deeper connection, more trust, better interrelational ecosystems. So it's a very powerful tool when we choose to use it.
When we get past the amygdala and we're talking fight, flight, freeze cycles that go back and forth, we'll eventually reach a stage where our observations go, oh, this thing that's happening in front of me, I need to empathize with it. How do we get to that part of the cycle?
Because as you touched on there, Tyler, the reality is empathy has two great enemies. One is low time and the other is high stress. And if we asked your audience to put their invisible hands up right now as they're listening to us, do you have low time and high stress? I would guess 90+% of people would say yes, because that's just the world we live in. Today, we talk about a Barney, B-A-N-I, a Barney world, of which a huge amount of that is specified around anxiety. 360 million people suffering with anxiety. So for as long as we are living in a state of anxiety, you touched on the fight or flight, the brain is not able to access the part of the brain that is responsible for empathy, right? It is quite literally pumping energy, blood, all of the hormones, cortisol, adrenaline into your system in order to fight or flight, to run away from the perceived threat, from the anxiety, from the high stress, from that panic that we're all living in. So to answer your question, how do you really access the best of this skill set? You have to do it in a place where the neurological system is balanced. Because when you're in fight or flight, and you know what's interesting about the brain, Tyler, is that whilst we have evolved phenomenally, right, over hundreds of thousands of years, what the brain still cannot do today is decipher between types of threat. So that response, that fight or flight response, was perhaps created, as it were, from an evolutionary point of view to help us, run away from tigers or threats in the jungle. But today, that could be a toxic boss. Your brain doesn't know the difference. So when that potential threat, when that high stress, high anxiety reality is surrounding you, the fight or flight response will be activated. Your empathy will decline. There's actually very little you can do about it. It's neurological. So to access empathy, to sustain empathy, we first have to sustain environments where we can access those skill sets.
You have to be well to be empathetic. And with an increasingly difficult environment for empathy to try to exist, because with access to social media and how quickly we can connect with all the stressors in the world, to be able to create a state of mind where you can reach an empathetic loop is becoming increasingly more difficult. And so that's why we're probably seeing those higher levels of anxiety in people, higher levels of stress in people. And that's such a difficult thing to push back on. Now, this is something that's so near and dear and important to you. Mimi, I'm curious, within the realm of empathy, is there a specific thing, a hill that you're willing to die on that everybody should be doing?
The backbone to all empathy is listening, which is why I touched on it earlier when you asked me about kind of leadership traits. If we all listened a little more to each other, then perhaps we would, certainly with more speed, overcome some of those challenges you were just touching on, right? The state of our world, the existence of social media, the pressure we put ourselves under, the fact that we have 24/7 access to the world's worst videography, right? If you want to watch the worst things in the world, you can do it at any time of the day or night, right? In real time. So the ability to listen to each other, the ability to actually focus on understanding and listening to understand versus listening to reply, which is what most of us are doing all the time, probably can change the world. I think not only would it shift our workplaces and our relationships and our families, but perhaps it could lead to world peace. Perhaps it might even solve some conflicts, of which there are 21 live conflicts right now around the world. So if I had to say, as you said, like, what is that one skill set that I would fall on and say the whole world needs to master this, it would be to listen better. When people feel heard, they rise. People do better when they feel seen. We were born to be that way. In fact, when two babies are born equally sick, the one that receives more empathy will outlive the other one. As I said earlier, this is pro-social. This is not just about feeling better. It's about living longer.
There's a study on this, and I did it in one of my classrooms when I was a teacher, part of a land based agriculture program where we grew plants. And without cussing, we talked very poorly to some plants, and to other plants, you talk very
Um,
kindly to them. And yeah,
yes,
and we
yes.
didn't do it in a longitudinal enough. And yeah, we didn't do it in a longitudinal enough way
Mhm.
to see measurable effects. But we've pulled up the research that shows the kids, and they listen and they
Yeah,
respond to
yeah,
stressful environments, and they don't grow as well if you're mean to them, right? And if you don't give them empathy, I love the message and listening to reply. It's a very strong statement. And one, I've heard many times, and more often than not, we face leaders that have already had their
mm,
response ready and made before they've even gone through listening. They're just giving the person the floor to speak, is what we say. And, I've been instructed by
mm.
leaders, none that work with me now, but when somebody is frustrated and comes in, they just say, hey, we're just going to hear them and then say this, okay? And well, we've already dictated what we want to say before we even get there. That's not empathy. That's not
Mm.
understanding. That's dictation, a conversation. A person is still going to leave feeling frustrated because you're not aligning to even just listening to them and hearing them out genuinely.
Right.
Now, maybe such a powerful conversation we've just had in 22 minutes so far. I want to squish that into an elevator pitch with you here and try to get this statement from you in about 15
Right.
seconds. Do you want to give me your best try at an elevator pitch for the importance of empathy?
Oh, 15 seconds. Okay. I deeply believe that the more the world talks about empathy, the more empathy the world will have. And that is because this is a fundamental human survival skill for our evolution. If we are to survive and, yes, thrive as a human race, it will be empathy that is the point of difference. How did I?
That was so well done. That was great. And, we got to give you a little, hey, I just loved
Amazing.
that. It was so good. And hey, talking about the adversity we face, the difficult things that come our way, it's a nice segue from our earth element that talks about the values into our air element, which talks about the wind and the adversity we face. And with that, let's get into headwinds and tailwinds. In Headwinds and Tailwinds, we get down to the mistakes we've made and what was in the aftermath to learn. And to get into the comfort zone of mistakes, Mimi, we are going to play another game here. And this is a new game it's not aired yet. It's called Adversity Mad Libs. So I'm going to ask you to fill in some blanks for me. They can
Oh,
be honest truth, totally made up, completely unhinged. It's up to you where you want to take this, okay?
okay. So I just fill in.
Yeah, just filling in the blanks. I'll read a sentence. I'll put some blanks in there. I think my last guest actually asked me to flash these up on the screen. It was helpful for them. So let me flash them up on the screen for you as we go through here too. And I'll try to I'll
Perfect.
have probably flashed them up a couple times here. So okay. I once misjudged someone based on blank and learned blank.
I once misjudged someone based on misconception, and it cost me my relationship.
There was a time when empathy felt like a liability, especially when blank happened.
There was a time when empathy felt like a liability, especially when I felt that I had misjudged the situation.
I chose to blank instead of react, and it changed everything.
In a moment of pressure, I chose to listen instead of react, and it changed everything.
The person I misunderstood the most ended up teaching me blank.
The person I misunderstood most ended up teaching me the power of empathy.
I broke down after blank, but what I rebuilt from that space surprised me.
I broke down after he left, but what I rebuilt from that surprised me.
Thank you so much for sharing some of those. I have to say, it's new because it hasn't aired at the time that we're recording this. And that was the smoothest run of the game I've played. You absolutely crushed that. And it's a way to get into talking about adversity and understanding adversity a bit. And so, in a vulnerable space here, I'm curious, what is
Yeah.
something that you had to
Mm.
unlearn?
I think I had to unlearn questioning myself. I think in my 20s, I questioned everything I did all the time, I was constantly trying to measure myself against other female leaders, predominantly in my field. I was in the marketing industry back then, marketing and advertising. And I can remember I lived in Hong Kong for a while, and I can really remember there was a time when I would come home at the end of every week and sit and worry about everything I had done that week. Maybe I should have done that better. Did I say too much? Did I say too little? Did I wear the right thing? Did I speak up enough? Did I not speak enough? I had to unlearn that, and that came in my 30s, right? And maybe that's age, maybe it's time, maybe it's experience, maybe it was the environment I was in. By that point, I was in Singapore, a very different culture, very different way of approaching my work. But it was a conscious, intentional shift to say, okay, enough, right? I have to do what I think is right, and that has to be enough. And I live by that now, Tyler. I think that every day we are faced with so many decisions, and there are so many challenges. I think people look at like the work that I do, for example, on social media, and whilst I give my audience, that the people that are with me there, 100% honesty. There is nothing fake on there. Like, what you see is what you get. That is just it. That is me in that airport. That is me on that stage. That is me with my daughter, right? There's no kind of filter going on there. But I think people believe that you can build this work, being an entrepreneur, a podcast even, which I know very well how much goes on behind the scenes. I don't think most people do. So I think you have to unlearn that questioning of yourself, because otherwise you'll never make progress. It's going to be hard. People are going to dislike what you do, or question what you do, or criticize what you do. But you can't do that to yourself, because progress can only come from belief. And I think probably the questioning yourself is the antithesis of belief.
Do you find that every time you do something new, something for the first time, that questioning of oneself finds a way to return?
No, not anymore. I think now, I just think the trick is positive, empathetic, optimistic intentions. If you know truly that you did what you felt was right, what you really believe was the right thing, it won't always work. Sometimes bad things happen. People get sick, accidents happen, bad stuff, right? Life is full of bad stuff. But you can only make the decision that you make at the time, and you have to build it on those values. I have values around honesty and integrity and grace. I think people don't talk about grace much anymore. It's very old fashioned, I think. But for me, it's integral to who I am, to how I show up in the world. So if I know I made those decisions based on those values, if it doesn't work or something happens, I'm not going to spend hours questioning that. I'm just going to focus on fixing it.
So with that, how do you overcome some of the biggest setbacks you faced?
With patience. I think I mentioned earlier that's what I would teach my younger self. Every day I have to relearn that. That one is a lifelong journey, right? I think we all suffer with a lack of patience because of the world we live in, the speed of life. I want to do more, right? I want to spread more empathy now, today. But of course you can't, right? There's only so many planes you can get on and so many podcasts you can do in a day. But patience is the ability to slow down enough to reflect on the situation and make that decision based on the values that you've put in place for yourself. Without patience, you miss all the best bits. And I think for me, I have all these tiny micro moments of wonder, and I want to be super conscious of them, super, super intentional of them. I don't ever want to be one of those people that looks back and says, if only I had spent more time with my daughter, or if only I had taken that plane to X for Y. So patience, I think, is your greatest friend in overcoming adversity. The other thing I would say, which is really micro, is I never make decisions at night. It probably comes back to patience, right? Be patient, wait for the morning. Don't fix it now. Because I truly believe, Tyler, that things look different in dark hours than they do when the sun comes up the next day. And I teach that to my daughter as well. Never make difficult decisions at night, because you're just not fully functioning in that time period.
Well, your brain's been through a full day of decision making, right? I just put out today that 35,000 decisions as an average on what we make in a day. And to then make the biggest one at the end of that day, that's a lot. I think, it was Steve Jobs who said he doesn't make any decisions after 11 a.m., right? Because he He
Oh,
believed that the best
okay.
decisions came with fresh minds. I'm curious, are you good at patience now?
Yeah, I'm good at it, but as I said, you have to practice it every day because there'll always be
So
something.
it's a skill.
It's a skill, and more than that, maybe it's a practice. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was leaving my office where I am now in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. That's where I live. And I wanted to go and pick up my daughter. And on this occasion, I didn't have my car. So I needed to take an Uber. And my first Uber, it got very close, like maybe 2 minutes away, and then it cancelled, which of course is blood boilingly frustrating, right? Because I'm supposed to get to school, right? It's my daughter. This is a very emotional commitment for me to pick her up from school. And so I booked another one and I waited for another one, and I could literally feel my blood pressure rising, with that anxiety of why would they do? I mean, why did he do that? He was nearly hit. Then I just said, just be patient, right? Another car's going to come. It's Kuala Lumpur. It's a major city, right? Another one will come in like 4 minutes. Is it actually going to make any difference to you or your daughter? Not really. 4 minutes. So I pick her up at 4 p.m. or 4:05. It's really going to make no difference in the wider world. But that's why I say it's a practice and it's an intentional one. I remember it was yesterday, I actually said to myself, sit down, because I was standing on the side of the road, sit down on the bench, take a breath, and wait. Why are you rushing? What's the rush? Maybe something happened to him. You have no idea. Empathy, right? You have no idea what happened to that driver when he was 3 minutes away. But he had a reason to cancel, nothing to do with you. So now you need to move on. So it's a daily practice. You have to be very intentional, I think, about mastering it.
One of my phrases of the last 3 to 5 months that I've really picked up and saying to myself and the people close around me is, what's our rush?
Yes, yes.
So I love that you
Yeah,
showed that, because it's so true. What is our rush? What are we pushing to
yeah.
get to that so
Yes.
quickly and so urgent that
Yes.
we need to work ourselves up so much over it? Because it's not that big of a deal. Talking about this idea of adversity and this idea of decision making. And when we should make decisions, this is going to be a nice segue from our air element that talks about adversity that we face to our water element. Small shifts, big waves. In Ripples of Change, we discover how to make a lasting impact. And Mimi, we're going to play another game here. This one can be a little more dragged out. We can take our time on this one if we really need to. And the idea here is some quick tips. I'm going to ask you some big questions, some out there questions, and I want in a sentence or two from you the advice for that. Okay?
Okay.
So, what's something strong leaders get wrong about vulnerability?
You know why I'm pausing? Because I'm going to tell you what my instinctive response was. My instinctive response, Tyler, was that it's a weakness, right? The reason I didn't say it is because I think that this is so much part of the social media, LinkedIn rhetoric that I'm not sure it's actually helpful, right? Do I believe it's a weakness? No. But I'm also not sure it's a strength. And I'll tell you why. I think as leaders, we have to be honest. We have to be open. We have to be transparent. In fact, the new generations are going to demand of that. We see that in the data, in behavior all the time. Obviously, I believe you need to be able to show empathy, and you need people to be able to empathize with you. And for someone to empathize with you as their leader, you have to share enough for them to know you. But do you actually need to be vulnerable? I'm not sure. You can be open, transparent, honest, candid. But is that vulnerability? That's why I paused. I think that this word has become very popular. In my opinion, I'm not sure it's a strength. I think you can be all of those other things without actually being vulnerable. I don't have a dictionary in front of me, but if I did, I would look it up. And I suspect that to be vulnerable means something along the lines of open to being hurt, right? Open to risk, open to pain. I'm not sure we need those things as a leader. So should you be open and honest and candid and true? And my teams, I've always been super true with them. Like I said with my social media, what you see is who I am, and they know that. So if that is vulnerability, then yes, it's a strength. But I'm not sure that is vulnerability. I think perhaps we're using that term wrong. So I would say what leaders are getting wrong about vulnerability is what it actually is.
Completely agree with you on that. And I'm so happy that you went down that tangent of an explanation for everybody because it makes complete sense when it's put that way. What's your go to reset when empathy starts to feel exhausting?
Empathy never feels exhausting. I think that's also a misconception, Tyler. What you may find exhausting is, let's say, too much or an extended use of compassion or sympathy. So, for example, that exhaustion you feel watching bad news on the news, right? And you just think, oh, I'm going to turn it off. I can't watch any more of these children starving in a war zone. I just can't. It's too much for me. It feels exhausting. But that is sympathy. It's sometimes called, compassionate exhaustion or compassionate overload. It's not empathy. The ability to understand others is a data set. There is no such thing as too much understanding of others. It cannot deplete you. In fact, the data will show you that the higher your empathy is, the lower your burnout is. So the short answer is that empathy will never exhaust you. It's about understanding what you are using, the skills, the values, the emotions you're using when you experience that exhaustion.
Well, that example that you gave there might not even be sympathizing, but it might actually be a flight response, right? To turn it off, that's a sign that you're stressed out about it. That's not empathy. You're
Mm.
fleeing that situation, you're leaving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's one phrase every leader should use more often?
I hear you. I think that, as I said earlier, so many people are just desperate to be heard. The life coaching industry is growing at a rate of knots. People are so desperate to be heard that they will pay people to listen to them. So I think as a leader, if there's just 3 words that you could say more often, it would be that. Thank you, Mimi. I hear you. I think it would shift everything.
Completely agree with that one. Well said. Mimi, what steps do you take when you have to change something?
Equal ones. I think that when you have to change something, you have to take equal steps, one foot in front of the other. Change never happens overnight. All right. Change is a behavioral response. And human beings, we hate change. Right. That's why, like, change management is such a big thing in the world, right? And again, we spoke about fight or flight earlier. As human beings, when we're facing change, that reptilian mind, that original brain of yours, is literally telling you, you might die, you might die, you might die. Right? This is a risk, step away, step away, step away. So it's natural for us. We hate change. We're scared of change. It's a risk to our survival, at least subconsciously, right? So to your question, when you have to face change, when you have to navigate it, particularly if you're bringing other people with you, particularly if it's children, right? You're in an educational environment. That's why I say take equal steps. 1 foot in front of the other. Don't try and do it all in a day. Don't rush anyone. Explain your actions, explain their actions, give them context. When people know why, that risk, that fight or flight risk, lowers, diminishes. When you say what's in the room, it becomes smaller. So, in answer to your question, how do you approach change? I would say with equal steps.
It's one of the advice that we give to people get up on that stage for the first time and talk, and they're feeling nervous. One of the
Mm.
first things you should maybe do is say to your audience, it's my first time, I'm pretty nervous. And then all of a sudden, your nerves go away because it's out there. We've said it, it's gotten smaller.
True.
As you just mentioned. Now, with that, you've talked these small little steps that we're taking. How do
Mm.
you communicate that when you're actioning a change?
Clearly, I think I touched on it earlier. Context is so important. The key about empathy, and you touched on your example there when people are going on the stage, empathy is about them, not about you. So when it comes to communication skills, it's fundamentally about communicating in a way that the audience can understand you. So it's not about how you want to communicate. When people say to me, what are your tips, like you just touched on, for standing on stage, for speaking to an audience? Well, the tips change every time because the audience changes every time. So the key to empathetic communication, whether you're in a change or otherwise, effective communication is about understanding your audience and then adapting that conversation to them. I mean, similar, I guess, in an environment where you're in an educational setting. Of course, how you communicate a school location change to the teachers will be different from how you tell the parents, will be different from how you tell the children. So I think the secret really to communication success is to understand that in empathy, your job as the communicator is to think far more about the audience than what it is that you are saying.
How do you make that change last?
Consistency. I talked earlier about patience. I think patience's best friend is consistency. Again, especially with children, but actually with anyone. Be consistent. Don't let people fear inconsistency because it is fearful, right? Children who have parents who are very erratic become very erratic, right? Their nervous system is constantly in flux. So I think that consistency of whatever you're doing, your work, your job, your communication, your brand building, your podcast, it doesn't matter. Consistency is a superpower. Keep going and keep doing it the same way. I think people thrive, to be honest, when things stay the same.
I have a book coming out. Well, when we record this, I have a book coming out. When you're listening to this, hopefully I have a book that's published with Routledge, The Elemental Leader. And one of the things people have asked me when I've shared with them that I've done this is, how did you write one? I could never write one. And I said, I committed. It took me 2.5 years to get it done. More, well, yeah, maybe more. But I committed to at least every single day, at a bare minimum, one sentence in the book.
Nice.
Because if I could do one sentence a day, maybe in 10 years I could have a book. But some days I felt like writing 5 paragraphs. And some days I felt like I was writing half of my chapter. And that small, consistent action of I'm going to add one sentence a day led it to getting done to a stage where it's at now. And so when we talk about what can you do consistently, on episodes before this one, I had Martin, the teacher, physical trainer, come on. And he said, the best thing you can do is have a small, consistent action to stay healthy. And, we talked about at the gym, having your bag packed the night before you go, because when you wake up in the morning, your bag's already ready and it's packed and good to go. That small, consistent action, it's those steps we take, that nudge to yourself that makes it just last a little bit more consistently. So I appreciate the context you gave there. And as we talked about change that we're bringing about, we start to talk about the decisions we make that bring us to our fire element. And with that, we're going to get into Spark or Burn. Alchemist, before we get into our last elemental segment here, it would mean the world to me if you've enjoyed this episode with Mimi Nicklin to head over to Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast from, and give it a review. But also, go follow Mimi Nicklin on her social media. Links and handles, everything is in the description. Helping her grow, giving us that review, it amplifies this message out to the world. And that is our goal on Impact. Ignite your ideas, face the flames. In Spark or Burn, we work with the things that either spark success or burn lessons into our memory. And we have one more game to play here. And this one is another rapid fire, kind of like principle or preference, but it's final decision, a final answer rather. We're going to play Would You Rather style, where I give you a scenario and you pick one or the other with no explanation and no time to justify the decision.
Okay.
Here we go. Would you rather speak your truth and cause discomfort, or say nothing and protect the vibe?
Speak my truth.
Would you rather be misunderstood for being too soft, or misunderstood for being too bold?
Too bold.
Would you rather stay quiet so others speak, or speak to model vulnerability?
I would rather stay quiet.
And I put the word vulnerability in there because it's a tricky word to talk about. Would you rather create psychological safety or strategic clarity first?
Psychological safety.
Would you rather listen to someone vent or challenge their beliefs in the moment?
Listen to them.
Would you rather apologize publicly or hold space privately?
Privately.
Would you rather lead a burned out team with heart or a high performing one with edge?
Burned out team, but with heart.
Would you rather get emotional in a keynote or stay composed and professional?
Composed and professional.
Would you rather be the most empathetic person in the room or the most respected?
The most empathetic.
And would you rather keep harmony or speak up to shake the room?
Speak up.
So I want to pick your brain on two. And, let me rephrase that, because I don't want to pick your brain, because that's another
Okay.
listen. And I'm curious about something here. When I asked you the question on would you rather get emotional on a keynote or stay composed and professional, there was a hesitation and a pause. I want you to walk me through your decision-making process on that answer.
So yeah, I did. I paused. I feel like forever. Probably was 2 seconds. It felt like 25. The reason that was hard for me is I present with soul every day. Do you know what I mean? And I don't just mean present on stage. I mean that's just that's just who I am, right? So to lead with heart, to be heartful in everything I do is who I am. However, as a value, I am extremely committed to professionalism. And it comes back, I mentioned earlier, Tyler, the word grace. For me, professionalism and grace are very, very connected in my work, right? I don't work in the corporate world. It would be very different. If you're a corporate leader listening, this is it's different. It's slightly different in the corporate world. I am alone. I travel the world alone. I run my own platform. I generally work alone. I have a small team. So it is incredibly important to me, again, as I said earlier, in empathy for my audiences, that I stay graceful, professional, respectful at all times, especially because I work across a lot of cultures. So if you head on over to my Instagram page, you will see me fully covered in a hijab. You will see me dressed in a sari in India. You will see me in all kinds of local cultural contexts doing my utmost to be respectful and graceful and professional with the environment I'm in. So that's the reason I hesitated. I think luckily I never have to make that choice, because being respectful and graceful and leading with heart are the same thing to me. But when you made me choose, I had to really think, if I had to choose, what would I value? And I would value them over me. And therefore, I chose professionality.
Thank you for sharing that. And another quick one here. There was no pause, and it was a very quick answer, was asking about psychological safety. And so I'm curious on that, what that means to you and how it's shaping leadership.
It was easy for me because you said, if I'm right, the question was, would you rather have a psychologically safe environment or a high-performing one? But you'll never have a high-performing environment without psychological safety. So the actual answer is a no-brainer. People perform better when they feel safe. So psychological safety is an environment where people feel able to reach their full potential. They are not self-censoring. Self-censorship is in decline, not in growth, right? So people feel able to innovate, to ideate, to challenge, to build, right? It's that growth mindset that the whole world is looking for. So psychological safety is a prerequisite to all sustained performance. We won't have time today, but there are 6 types of power in the world. And when power is in the room, people will perform for the time that the power exists. When the power is not around or diminishes, the performance will be reduced. When you have psychological safety, that performance will be sustained because it is self-fulfilling. So for me, psychological safety is the foundation to everything. And just for context, there can be no psychological safety if there's not first empathy. Because if you don't understand what safety means to your people, how will you ever create it?
When we talk about empathy, psychological safety, professionalism, these are big, massive terms that have a lot of weight behind them. How do we separate the emotion from logic on this?
I don't know if we need to. I think there are very few times when emotion and logic are completely separate. What we do know is that our brain makes 88% of all decisions emotionally first. We are emotive beings. So nearly 90% of every decision, I think you said there's 35,000 in a day earlier, Tyler. Of those 35,000, 88% of them statistically are being made from the emotive mind. But logic is very quick to follow up, right? So if you're, I don't know, buying a car, right? Your emotive mind is going to help you choose what brand, what color, leather seats, I don't know, all of those things, right? But your rational mind is going to follow up very quickly. Can I afford it? Is there a payment plan? All of these types of things. Is it safe enough for my children, for example, right? So I don't know if you can separate out emotion and logic because they're so intertwined in the way that humans make decisions. Even when people don't think they're using emotion, they are. It's just so automatic that we don't always consciously know that we're doing it.
And with that, how do you make sure then that what you value shows up in the choices you make?
I think it goes back to everything we've spoken about today. I think it's the reason those values come together. So if I summarize, we've spoken about patience, we've spoken about consistency, we've spoken about grace. And I think that if you pull those three things together, so you are patient with yourself, with the world, with others, you do that consistently, you show up consistently. And when you show up, you do that with grace, with care for others, with values, with morals and ethics consistently and intentionally. I think if you can get those three things right, often and in sync, which is not always easy, then I think you're able to show up with consistent value.
Mimi, one of the ways that we have been ending the show here, or that I've taken on, is our previous guest on the show will leave a question for the future guest, not knowing who they are, the context, what they bring to the table. And so the question I have for you from the previous guest is from Andrew White, a gentleman from Australia that I spoke with, this morning, and we're recording this one now. And so this one's fresh on my mind, and I swear we didn't script this. He didn't know you were coming, but his question is, how important is connection to you? And what do you think are the three most important traits that will build the art of connection?
Well, we should definitely be friends, me and your last guest. Connection to me is everything. It is my life's work. Obviously, I come at it through empathy, but empathy is the core to all connection. So there couldn't be, like you said, Tyler, there couldn't be a better question. The second part was, what are the three steps to it? Did I remember that rightly? What was the second one?
Yeah, the second one was the three most important traits that will build the art of connection.
I would say intentional listening would be the first one. Intentional consistency would be the second one, to keep showing up and doing it again, to talk to our themes today. And to be able to be judgment-free, to meet people where they are, because that is the foundation for all connection.
Really appreciate the way you answered that. And I chuckle, like I said, no idea who's coming on this show. And this is a question they leave, and it's so fitting for you. Now, the same goes for you, though. You don't know who I have coming on the show next. They could speak to the same categories. They could be somebody completely different in a whole other realm. We can go fun. We can go intense and deep. Is there a question that you would like to leave? Well, not what is there, but what question would you like to leave the next guest?
So, Tyler, I'm going to ask your next guest that in a world of AI, what human skill set holds the potential to change our world? You're going to have to remember to tell me when that show is live so I can listen to the answer.
Yeah, of course I will. Absolutely. It'll be a week after yours. I feel we get the week after yours goes live. That'll be perfect. And as we begin to wrap up here, Mimi, how can our listeners get in touch with you if they want to connect and understand your story more?
So they can find me across the internet at Mimi Nicklin. I'm particularly active on Instagram and LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. And my website is www.empathyeverywhere.co. And my new book, Empathy at Work, is available on Amazon now.
Congratulations. And alchemists, if you're still listening to this, all of these are going to be linked in the description of the show. So if you are ever wondering how to find it, just head over there. Make sure you give her a follow. Make sure you check out her books. An incredible person rooted in very strong values and a strong message for the world. Mimi, what's a final thought you want to share or leave with the listeners today?
My final thought is this, Tyler, and we've touched on themes around this for the whole hour, which I've loved, which is to always remember that we are all more alike than we are different. And the media, the news, will have us believe that it's different. But in the end, as human beings, we all want to love, we all want a hero, we all want a sense of adventure, we all want to grow. We are all more alike than we are different. And if we spent more time looking for the things that bring us together versus the things that pull us apart, I think we would have a far more harmonious, peaceful, and progressive, and definitely empathetic world.
Well, from the bottom of my heart, before we pressed record, I said I was so excited to have this connection and to get this one-on-one and understand so much. It's been such a great hour of conversation for me. And it's an episode that, as I edit this and I listen back, I'm going to really enjoy revisiting the stories here. And so from me to you, I just wanted to say thank you for taking time out of your day, your busy schedule, to connect, collaborate, and challenge the status quo of what leadership is.
Thank you very much for having me. You are an extremely graceful host.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of the show. If you have feedback, a suggestion, or just want to start a conversation, fire off an email to tyler@elementaleducator.com. I actually read them. And if this episode sparked something, leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps more leaders find the show. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, where I put out additional content. I'll see you next time, same same place.